Of you are absolutely disillusioned with politics, the political system, and you've lost faith in the system. And a lot of things have done that. I am one of those eternal optimists. I still believe we actually have one of the best parliaments in the world. What you think of the current inhabitants and what you may think of the next lot often colour our judgment about what I think is a good system. However, there are flaws in it. And one of those that has come to light is that, not unreasonably, I think, when a minister loses their job, they kind of don't have any say about it, and they get a redundancy payment. Now, some of you might think that's a bit of a cheek. It's different to being an MP, a minister. It has a different salary. But in the, let's call it what it is, the chaos of the Boris Johnson and Liz Truss years, there were an awful lot of ministers, and it cost £1 million of your money in compensation to the rotation of ministers in jobs. And that's led the Labour Party to say they're going to stop that. Now, a little part of me is a bit suspicious about this. Is it smoke and mirrors? Is it, you know, is it a sort of thing that they should be making a big song and dance about? And I'd genuinely like to hear your views. 0344 499 1000. And I'm also very interested to hear the views of my next guest, Gina Miller, leader of the True and Fair Party in the UK, known to many of you, of course, during the Brexit discussions as well. Gina, welcome.
Hi, Nick.
Well, I hope I haven't. I have summarised it reasonably accurately for you. You have heard, no doubt, what the Labour are saying about this extraordinary level of expenditure. Where do you sit in this?
It's an interesting piece of research. I mean, I think it's one of the biggest open secrets in Parliament, actually, in our parliamentary system, that this happens. But I think it's less about the money involved, this Labour research, and more about reminding us about the total chaos and shambles within the Tory party since 2019. So I don't think they're doing it necessarily out of wanting to reform the system, because the system does need reforming. It's almost a given that, you know, the golden handshakes, if you've only been in office for a few weeks, seems absurd to the average person in the street, and it is absurd. But there is a much more fundamental question here, which is about, you know, having competent ministers in post for a length of time that they can actually get hold of their brief and do it in a way that delivers for people.
Oh, now
and what happens is
no, go on. I won't interrupt.
What happens is the shuffling is more about keeping the party on side and keeping different factions rather than rewarding people who are most suitable for the job. And I think that's where the system is being exploited, and that does need looking at. And I'm very much in favour of separating actually the system from the parliamentary system and the legislature. And I'd look at something like the Senate, where you actually go back to. I'd hand the power back to Parliament to say that when there is a reshuffle, that Parliament then has to say on the competency of that minister to take the role. I mean, the nonsense recently of having this, minister of common sense to try and keep a minister on side is basically nonsense.
OK, listen, so many things in there, and I'm going to come to them all. But I just briefly, I want to return to the money, and I will do it briefly, because I think you're right. I think that the substance is beyond that. Why I think this is a bit smoke and mirrors is actually, if Labour are going to come to power, you don't need to change the law, because this is in law, actually, this compensation at the moment. But also in that same law, a minister can turn it down. It's simple as that.
Yeah.
And the idea that this is a big dramatic statement to show how brilliant the Labour are, I think is smoke and mirrors, and it's probably, as you say, more designed to say, wasn't that a shambles of the Tories, and remind everyone of it. The bottom line is a party leader just has to say, I will expect every minister to turn this down, and that's the end of it. It really would be the end of it. It's that simple. To come to your point about changing the system, if I may, you talk about the US system. At the moment, to give some clarity to our viewers and listeners, a Prime Minister theoretically can choose his cabinet from pretty well anywhere if he wanted, but the problem is they would not answer to Parliament. So you've got David Cameron at the moment in the Lords, not really answering to the Commons, but he does answer to the Lords. The American system separates essentially the chief executive, the prime minister, the president from the parliament, and consequently he could pick anyone. He could pick you, Gina, if you were an American citizen,
business person or whatever.
But they then answer to parliament through the equivalent of a select committee. The truth is, though, even with that system, it's divided by party lines. So when they come to approve an appointment, if it's the Republicans are president and the Republicans have the majority, they're going to appoint it, aren't they? So would much change?
It's not perfect, but it's about competency, because what they look at is they look at the CV of the individual taking up that role. And it does have some party lines, but it's better than I think that the system we have at the moment, because, you know, if you think of something like since I think it's 1997, we've had something like I can't remember. I think it's 27 housing ministers, something like that. But, you know, these briefs are not taken seriously. So if you keep changing, no wonder we have such poor policy making.
But
that's my point, because
isn't that down to the Prime Minister? Because at the end of the day, he doesn't have to change them. David Cameron, in credit to him, for the first 2.5 years, he didn't have a reshuffle.
No, that isn't credit to him. You're right. He did a lot less reshuffling than the subsequent Conservative MPs.
And the previous Labour government. Let's be fair.
Well, under the previous Labour government, you'd actually had 9 housing ministers, I think it was, since. And so, yes, you know, and pension ministers, my goodness, I think we've had 17 since 2001. I mean, you know, these areas of policy that are difficult keep having change of ministers, and that's not good for policy making.
How would you change
for us
that?
As a people?
What would you suggest then?
I think what we've got to do is a combination of a prime minister who actually understands that it's about the integrity of the post and not buttering up to whoever it is that's fighting within their party and rewarding them and making sure that, you know, you've got patronage. I mean, it's now descended into almost a farce about the way ministers are moved around.
OK, look, your point about the farce around the current administration, I mean, I get why you're making it. You're a political party as well. But if you go to the substance of what you're saying, I still don't understand how your alternative is going to work. So you want to appoint, you're Prime Minister, right? And what system would you have that said you had no choice who your pensions minister was and you had no ability to remove them? I mean, what system, how would that work?
No, you do have a choice. What you do is you nominate who it is you would want in that post, and then their credentials are looked at by Parliament.
Fine, so they get appointed.
They are somebody who actually have... Yeah.
And then they're no good, or you don't think they're doing a very good job. You want to fire them, don't you?
So you go back to you would then point to reshuffle. But the thing is, if you look at the last few reshuffles, you have to have a mechanism in there that will create checks and balances and not have the ability for a prime minister to reshuffle being used for alternative reasons, which is to actually keep a party together or stop the infighting. And it's about patronage. It's about moving the decks, you know, the chairs around the deck just to keep yourself in power.
The only place I can think that has any, and do correct me if I'm wrong, but the only place I can think that has that is the EU Commission, where once you're a commissioner for 5 years. And I'm not sure that's a shining example because it's not democratic.
No, I don't agree with that system either. No, I don't agree with that. I don't think you should be able to have it for 5 years, whatever. What I'm saying is we need to reduce the moving, you know, this in this roundabout that's happening all the time. We need to reduce it because it costs money. It costs money and it costs competency.
But then would you, for example, because I think the aspiration, I mean, I do agree with you on your aspiration, but I would ask you, I do think it is worth trying to figure out how it works, because would you say in any 5 years you can only have 2 reshuffles? Because I just don't think that that's a reasonable constraint.
No, I wouldn't put any time limit. No, it's not about the time limits. It's about the process. It's a process of having to go to Parliament and explain your decision or what it is, who it is you want to appoint, that would have the ramification of reducing the turnover, which at the moment is costing us a huge amount. It has in other countries. If you look at Australia, if you look in other countries that have the separation, it does have that because it's more about the technical abilities of the appointments and the CVs rather than the actual.
So you would say they shouldn't come from Parliament, basically. You would say they shouldn't come from Parliament, because to be fair with you, and I've said this endless times, you can literally get elected and not have run anything more in your life than a bath and end up running one of the biggest departments in the country. I mean, that is the strength and the weakness of our system. But
Yes.
to achieve what you want to do, you would be saying no to MPs becoming ministers, if I understand you right then.
No. You could have MPs. You could have a mix of individuals, which is what you would have. I think is you'd end up with some people who have technical ability, because the thing is they have to answer to the minister themselves is the person who's elected and answerable to Parliament and to the people. So I think having a technocrat underneath them, that's a whole different system, and that's actually something I am very much in favour of.
Oh, but you see, let me test that. That's interesting. I'm sorry, we're ranging all over the place here. I would have a technocrat underneath them instead of a head of a civil service of that department. I would have a technocrat, but I would make sure it was a technocrat who was politically aligned to me. None of this neutral nonsense. I want someone who believes in what I'm elected to try and do and would work very hard to push my agenda, be it whatever, ideological or just my manifesto. Would you support that?
I think you would have to, actually. I would support that, actually, because you need to work as a team.
Gina, we're agreeing on something.
I don't agreeing quite a lot, Nick. But if you think about it, in my business, I don't want someone working for me in my business who believes that my competitor is better. Why would I have them working for me, helping me promote and grow my business? If they believe my competitor was better than me, then they wouldn't be working. So, I mean, you've got those things. It's a lot of this needs cleaning up. And the thing is that we need to start somewhere. And I think what Labour are doing is saying, the golden handshakes need to be looked at, and severance pay. It sounds as though they're doing it for the right reasons.
I disagree,
sure.
actually.
Going back to my point.
I think they're doing it for the wrong reasons. They want a quick hit. I don't think they've thought it through.
No, sorry, what I'm agreeing with you. I'm saying they're doing it for the wrong reasons. They're doing it to try and remind us about the total chaos. We all know about the total chaos that's happened in the Conservative Party.
Well, we do. You've managed to mention it so many times, I promise you.
No. Actually, if you look at this morning, some surveys have been done and focus groups. I think that I'd say around the country they know it, and this is from Conservative voting focus groups. So it's not just me saying this, but I think more importantly, it's about the strength of the system we have and looking at how we can improve it.
Sorry to interrupt you there. Your general principle, I see where you're going, but I would say to you, actually, it needs quite a lot of work, because I'm not quite sure how comfortable it sits with democratic principles or in practice. So I'll tell you what, I'm going to do something more on this in the future, and if we can get you in the studio, we'll also have some constitutional or government expert here to test the theories further. But thank you for joining me, Gina Miller, leader of the True and Fair Party there. Now, I know